Hello and welcome to Module 14. In this module, I'm going to guide you through the process of actually making use of the 3D content that you've been creating so far. So this is the end portion of the production pipeline. Now this end portion will change based on what the final use of the product is. So for example, if you have the end portion being something that you need to render within Maya, then that process will stay within Maya. You may have a bunch of objects that create a scene. You may have a character that's being animated through the scene. In that case, you would use whatever the tools are that are necessary. It used to be that within Maya, if you're going to render, you'd use something called Mental Ray. Now the built-in renderer is Arnold. But there are other plugins and different external rendering engines and software that you can use for this process. But it really comes down to what your end goal is. Because this 3D content creation pipeline is centered around 3D content for games, that's where we're going to have the focus be. To that end, let me bring up a website really quick. The game engine I would recommend starting with, even though there are a lot out there and they all have different strengths and different uses, is actually Unity. I prefer Unity. It's a game engine that's fairly straightforward. They've got really good documentation, good ease of use for beginners, and it's one that I prefer to use right now, and actually have been focusing on it for most of the game production I've been doing lately. So within Unity, if you come to Unity's website, which is unity3d.com, you can get Unity, and you can actually get it for free. So I encourage you to download it and try it out. Once you have Unity downloaded, you'll have a window open up to get started, and you start by creating a new project. In this case, I'm going to call this 3D1 project, and I am going to just set it to my desktop, just because when I have active projects, out of habit, I like to work from my desktop. Not everybody's the same way. You may have a different location, but you're just creating a project. I'll set it to 3D and hit Create Project. Give it a second to do its job. So I'm going to pause the video here. I'll come back as soon as it's done loading. All right, it finished downloading or finished loading, and so this is the Unity editor. Now within Unity, there's a lot of different things that are going on here, and so rather than overwhelm you, I'll try and make it easy. First of all, you can change any portion of how things are laid out by dragging and dropping and moving and nesting and whatever else you need to. To make sure that we're all on the same page, though, so that you can understand what's happening, I'm going to go Window, Layout, Default. And in this way, you'll see exactly what I'm doing. Now, the way Unity is set up is so that here under the hierarchy, this is everything that's going on within a scene. So here in this environment, this is what's happening. Now, similar to Maya, if you hold down the Alt key and left, middle, and right mouse, you can get used to moving around in this world space. You can also, up here in the top right, simply grab a direction and start clicking around to be able to look around from specific angles or views. You can go from perspective to isometric, which is where it flattens out. And you can look around in the environment and get used to this, because this will help make the process easier as you're placing things and moving around in the environment. Once again, the hierarchy is what is currently in the level. So by default, this is bringing up the main camera and the direction light. Between the scene and the game is what the camera is seeing. And right now, there's just a single directional light. Think of this as like sunlight. This is a light that goes an infinite distance in a single direction. There's no drop off. And so really everything about this light is more focused on which direction is it pointing. Over here on the right side is the inspector. And the inspector gives you information about whatever it is that you have selected here in the hierarchy, or down in the project or wherever else. But it gives you that feedback and information to make changes. So think of it like the attribute editor within Maya. So if I grab the main camera, you can see I've got my position, my XYZ position, I've got my rotate, my scale. So if I change that rotate to 45 degrees, you see that that then moved. I can go back to 0. And then anything else that needs to be used for the object will be attached below. Now this is not going to be an exhaustive introduction to Unity, because really I'm just showing you the pipeline, and then from here you can build on the tools. Alright, so down here is the project, and this is everything that you're putting in to use for your game. And this is where what you've been making can be applied. There's also the console, which you should probably know about, so if there's errors or other things, those will show up under here. But right now you'll see that for the project there's this asset. So if I open up the folder that was just created, so this was on the desktop and I opened it, when you create a new Unity project, it will create these folders. Don't mess with the bottom 3 at all. You don't really need to. What you need to be focused on is the assets folder. Right now this folder is empty. But if I right click and create new folder, and I will call this Maya stuff. I can call it anything I want, and I come back to Unity, you'll notice it updated. So there's a new folder here. So I can take this and I can create a new folder here, and this I will call scenes. And actually I'm going to rename that because usually I use the scenes folder for the Unity scene. So I will call this models and create another folder. I will call this textures or source images or whatever you want to call it that works for you. And so when I come back to the folder here, you see that it is creating stuff. So within Maya stuff, there's the models and the textures. It's also creating these meta files. These generally tend to show up on PC. When I open it on a Mac, those will tend to disappear, but don't worry about them too much. For right now, just knows that there's the models and the textures. So this is updating as we speak, and it's going back and forth. So the way this really comes into play is very simply, if I want to use some of the things that I have created, it's as easy in most cases as just dragging and dropping. So I'll open up 2 folders. The first is the Unity project. The other one is my Maya project that we put together at the beginning of the modules. And so if I come under scenes, I can grab something like, where do we go? I'll grab the robot because I know there's a texture for that. And under models, I can just drag that robot right in. Under textures, I'm going to exit out here and go to my source images. There's the robot texture. I'll drag that in. And then it's as easy. Well, let me give it a second. This has to update sometime. So if there's a problem with your model, if something's not clean, if there's something that's going to break, it will break at this point. So it's good to save your Unity project as you go. So I'm going to pause this and wait until it's done processing, and then we'll come back. All right, it just finished going through the process. Sometimes it takes a while, other times it's fast, so it depends on what it's doing. But if I go under models, it's got the robot. It also created a material by default, because with the model it said, hey, there's a texture attached, so that's the texture. But I can simply grab and drag this object out. As you can see, it's very large in this space, so I may want to shrink it down a little bit. But I'm going to come up here to the inspector with that robot selected. You see it's shown up here. And I can go to reset, and that will zero everything out and make it go to the regular scale. So I can grab the original model and actually adjust the scale factor here if I need to, or I can adjust it on the robot up here. You need to remember to apply it as well. So after I change the scale, I needed to hit apply, but when I clicked away, it asked if I wanted to, and I said yes, and so now it's applied. So this is still reading at a scale of 111 because I just changed the import scale rather than the scale of the individual robot. So here's a robot. It's got the texture attached. And just as you had materials within Maya, you will want to adjust your materials within the game engine, because even though it may look one way in Maya, it won't look the exact same way in whatever you're outputting to. So depending on the rendering engine, depending on what you're using, you need to be aware that it will have its own set of tools also. And so right now it's standard, opaque. I can make this more or less metallic. Play around with that. I can add in a normal map. I can adjust this to be to have a specular map. There's a lot of different things you can add in or change to help with how this appears within the game engine. So that's the first part of bringing objects into Unity, is simply to bring in a Maya file and it will work in most cases. So I want to show you a workaround. If you're working with other people and trying to pass along assets, the only way this works is if everybody has the exact same version of Maya. It also has to be the full version of Maya. If you are using something like Maya Lite, or if you're handing, for example, your art assets off to a programmer and they don't have the current version of Maya, then it won't be able to pull in the object just natively as a Maya file. So in that case, what you would need to do is actually output it as a different type of file. So I'm going to come here to Maya. I'm going to open a scene. And I am going to open up that, let's see, where did it go? I know what I did. So what I did is, instead of copying, I just drag and drop. So let me undo some of my mistakes right now. I'm going to copy back into the Maya project, paste. Under the scenes, I want to bring back that model. So copy, paste. So once again, when you're moving things, try and not make the mistake I just did, and actually copy the things over. All right, so now as I'm looking this up, I can grab the robot and open it. And with this robot, because I want to retain some of this animation information, which I don't have yet, but I will in a second, but I want to retain the rig and all the information that's attached to it, I'm going to select this mesh, and I will export it as an FBX file. To do this, I will go File, Export Selection, and then I can tell it where to export to. So if I go to the desktop and I go to 3D1 project, I could even have put Unity at the front or something like that to help differentiate it, because I have closely named file folders. Under Assets, Maya Stuff, Models, what I can do is, because I'm exporting that selection, so I have that mesh selected and I'm exporting the selection, I can actually change this to be an FBX file. If this is not showing up, you want to make sure that it is actually there, or that the plugin's working. So to do that, it's Windows, Settings Preferences, Plugin Manager. So I'll open that. And right down here, there's fbxmaya.mll. I want to make sure that that is turned on, so those are checked. Then I can close it. And then if I come to File, Export Selection, if it wasn't there before, then it will be. If you just do Save As, it won't show up. You have to actually do Export. And I will call this Robot Export, just so that I have a name for it. There are a lot of different settings that you can change in here. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it as with all the settings it currently has. So I'll just do Export Selection. Then I'll hit close. It's not supporting some of this stuff, and so we'll take a look at that in a second. But now when I come over here, I don't need to export the texture again because that's already there. All right. So I did make one mistake just now. As I did the export, I forgot to repoint it to the Unity project. And so instead, I saved it within my scenes. And so I'm going to actually just drag that, where before I said to copy it, for the Maya file, so you have the backup. For the FBX, I'm just exporting from the Maya file over here. And so I want to make sure that that's under the Assets folder. And so I'll bring that up. And so now you see I have the robot export settings. And within the FBX export, you're going to notice a little bit of a change. So if I drag this out, that robot is tiny right now. The reason being, if you look at the file scale, if I don't change the settings that are the default settings, in some cases it puts it out at 1% of its actual size. So in order to have it be the real size, I would do that at 100. And once again, it's going to be huge, because if you remember this one, I actually lowered it down to 0.2 to 20%. So for that, I can change that to 20%, hit apply, and then they'll be the same size if that's something I need to do. But in this way, now I have a file that can be read by most things, even if you don't have a copy of Maya on your machine. If somebody gives you FBX files, then you're able to actually utilize that. So I'll reset that, move this over. And so that's another way of getting your objects in. So I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we're going to come back and continue to pull out objects that were created and go through the process of setting up a scene, putting in a character, and creating a build.